Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. As you guys come in, you guys come in. So I'm going to do a recap. Today is class six of women in leadership, women in the Bible, um, um, leadership through the women in the Bible. So this is class six. Today we're going to talk about Sarah, which is faith, waiting, and identity transfer. So let's talk about that really quick. Well, before we talk about that, I'm going to do a recap on class five. Class five, we talked about Martha of Bethany and Mary. Martha and Mary, and the leadership lesson was balance on priorities. And what we talked about there was you had Martha, who was being a steward in the kitchen, and you had Mary, who was at Jesus' feet. And Martha was upset that Mary was not helping her, right? So Martha showed us how busyness can lead to distraction and frustration, while Mary demonstrated the importance of being present and spiritually aligned. That is so important. So both roles matter, but Jesus highlighted that being aligned with God must come first. Busyness will always come, but being in alignment with God. So it showed that um, Mary was still in her leadership position. It just didn't look like the leadership position that it was of women of that time. See, women of that time, they were supposed to be in the kitchen. There's no way that they were supposed to sit at the feet any rabbi, sit at the feet of any rabbi and listen to teaching. They were supposed to be in the kitchen. So in those times, it looked like, okay, you're not in your position, but she was actually in her position. She chose to put God first. Both worlds, so it mattered. So the key takeaway from class five last week was effective leaders know how to serve without losing focus on what's important. Okay, so the whole thing is stand in purpose, leading by grace, right? Leading with grace. So today is class six. Now let's talk about it. Let me move my notes over here so we can get busy. Now, chapter six is about Sarah. Now the thing with Sarah is reading through the book of Genesis and reading about her and how she didn't know how to wait. Now she reminds me of the world we live in today, which is waiting. No one knows how to wait, right? And then they use this waiting and say, well, God has me in a waiting season. And they think being in the waiting season, that means that that's it, that is all, there's nothing more to it. You don't make a move until God tell you, and that's why I teach. Is what you speak is what you believe. So your mind has already processed waiting means do nothing. But spiritually, waiting means to rest, knowing that God, you said you're going to do it. I trust and believe you're going to do it. So I'm going to rest knowing it is so, and I'm going to continue on. That's what that means, right? That's the true spiritual alignment of what waiting is. It is resting. So when you're tapping into that, and you're resting, what I just said is God, I asked you for something. I believe it to be so. I'm going to go out and I'm going to continue my role because now that my nervous system is regulated, that's the most important thing when you become healed is self-regulating your nervous system because that is your discernment. That is how God speaks to you so you'll know your cues. So when you're executing, and thank you for the likes, guys, when you're executing and moving forward, what happens is you know that, okay, if I do the wrong thing, then God will take that from me. Then God will remove that from me. Do you understand? So listen, no worries, but we're going to learn the difference between waiting and we're going to learn the difference between resting. Okay. So before we get into it, like I said, welcome into class six. I am Coach Nye. I'm your instructor for today. So we're going to talk about Sarah, faith, waiting, and identity transformation. That's what we're talking about. So the opening psalm, I like to open up with Psalm 34:4, and it says, I sought the Lord and he answered me. He delivered me from all my fears. Now, that psalm for me, it was, King David's testimony, right, of God's faithfulness. And we have to be, our testimonies are so important, right? So it was offering assurance that earnest prayer brings divine peace, protection, and relief from anxiety. So when you need to calm your nervous system, when you need to ask God for a thing instead of sitting and waiting, ask Him for it, get that rest and move along. Move along, right? So the primary scripture is Genesis chapter 16 through 18 and chapter 21. Okay, Genesis 16 through 18 chapter 21. So, the leadership context for this whole course is Sarah's story teaches powerful leadership lessons about waiting seasons, identity transformation, and trusting God's promise even after mistakes. Now, I always take things back to Hebrew and I look at what the Hebrew scholars' context is, or what they, had to say about her or explain her in that way. And the reason why I take it back to Hebrew is because when it's interpreted, when it's brought over from Hebrew and, it's gone through Greek, and it's going through Latin, and it's come to English, it changes. So I always take everything back to Hebrew. But it's Sarah's laughter. What they noted was Sarah's laughter reflects tension between promise and perception. Now, that is a leadership lesson in waiting. Right? So her laughter, when God said it was going to be a thing, it reflected the tension between the promise and the perception. So the leadership skills, I like to do the pros and cons before we get into this teaching. The pros and cons of this is that it showed the pros was faith and perseverance. That's what it shows. But the cons of it is the impatience, right? The impatience and the comparison that Sarah gave. So let's get into number one, resting season, which you guys like to call waiting seasons. So the resting seasons develop leadership character. Now, one of the hardest parts of leadership is learning to rest. And I know we're taught learning to wait, but it's learning to rest. And then you have to rest with faith, then promise, right? Then promises take time. You have to rest knowing that it shall be so, and that the promise is going to take some time. It is not that it's taking some time just because God, a lot of us, and this is, we have to be very careful as leaders. Let's put this out there. You have to be very careful as leaders, because what happens is you have people come to you. They're looking for guidance, they're looking for wisdom. And what I've learned to do is change the way I speak, meaning that when you tell someone that's going through, right? And you are at your lowest right now, you're grieving or whatever it is, and I tell you, oh, just you in the waiting season, just wait. It's going to be in divine timing. For you, a person that don't understand what divine timing is, what I just told you is never going to happen. And it causes people, when they get in the waiting season, to become hustlers. And that's what Sarah did. They start operating from their own understanding, making things happen, trying to force God's plan or whatever it is. But it's not. It's your resting season, because divine timing is right now. Divine timing is in the present. The reason why you're not hearing God, and the reason why you're not seeing what He has to say, is because you're already in the future. Your future thinking, anxiety. You're already worrying about next month's rent. You ask God for a thing today. Today is May 3rd. Your rent is due June 3rd. And you ask God, okay, God, I don't have a job. I don't have this. How am I going to make rent? And then you ask Him and you pray for it. And then you sit in the waiting season, because they told you, you just got to wait. Now you're sitting there doing absolutely nothing, just sitting there, because you're looking for every sign. You're listening to Him to talk to you, speak to you. You're looking for Him in every direction, right? When the whole time He needs you to execute, but not off of your own will. He needs you to execute, meaning you ask me for something. Now I need you to rest, meaning don't put your thoughts on how is this going to get paid. Let it go. Just rest, knowing that I'm going to work. And as you move forward in life, you get up every day, do what you need to do. Go on about your day, because God is going to make sure that whatever it is that you need, you're going to find it along the way on your journey. You're going to find what you need on your journey to get what needs to be done for next month. But when you get in the waiting season, a lot of people just stand, they don't go in the rest of the season because they don't understand what the rest of the season is. They get in the waiting season and then they sit like, well, maybe I can go do this. And then they start doing their own thing. And when you start doing your own thing, you become frustrated, like Sarah, that we're about to get into. So, as we talked about with faith when the promises come. So, in Sarah's story, we see how waiting season shaped and refined a leader's character, which supposedly is her and Abraham, right? So, God promised Abraham a great nation. This was in Genesis 12. He said, you're going to have a great nation, but it was years had passed and Sarah remained without a child. God tell us things and things don't happen the way we need it to happen. And a lot of times it's because we're too focused on looking for it to happen in the natural way. Listen, Jesus came through Mary, and it wasn't the physical way that we think that it should come, right? So the same way, why you think God won't do it for you? I'm not saying that you're going to go have a baby Jesus. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, what makes you think that God just won't do a miracle in your life as well? So after all those years, there was no child. See, in that culture, right, where this carried a deep emotional weight. In that time, a woman without a child, you can't give your husband a son. That was emotional weight. You get looked down upon. And then, people, listen, they wasn't just, people ain't just crazy now. They was crazy back then too. They would look at you and say, oh, you have to be cursed if you can't have a child. You bearing, God is blessed, that God is punishing you. They take it to the extent because it didn't go on the natural flow of what they thought it should be. But then you look at it. They had that to say about a person that didn't have a child, but then Mary had Jesus. And it was like, yeah, right, right. So they believed God for what they expected to be. So after God promised him and she was still childless in that culture, it put a lot of doubt and pressure and uncertainty. But many leaders, like Sarah, experienced the tension between promise and timing. And that's what I teach you guys in the leadership programs and things that I teach, is that timing is in the second. You cannot rush time. I don't care. It is 1:15 p.m. my time right now. And that's what I see. But what's behind the scene is the seconds. And that's where God is, in the seconds, in those breaths. That's where God is. So right now, I need something done by 1:16, and it's already 1:15. I gave up. But God is in the second. So God is at 1:15, 5 seconds. You see how much time you have when you get into the present time, and that's where God is. That's where God heals. So like most leaders, like Sarah, she experienced a tension between promise and time. And so resting, quote, you guys say waiting season, often exposes what? Your fears, impatience, and insecurities. And that's why I tell people, don't look at it as, I change the way you think, right? Because your mind is wired, waiting season, I don't like to wait. Change it. Resting, right? So it will expose you to the fear. This is why people get out there and hustle, and they get out of alignment trying to fix something they asked God for. But it also can develop patience, faith, and trust in God when you stop looking at it as a waiting season. When you stop looking at it as a waiting season and start looking at it for what it is, resting season, you'll see, and it will develop within you patience, faith, and trust in God. So scholars note that about 25 years passed between the promise and what was fulfilled. But during that time, Sarah's faith was tested and it was strengthened. And as you read on in the chapters, you'll see how she did Hagar, and it wasn't right. You put your slave, your maid in that predicament. You put her in there, but then she blamed Abraham for putting her in that situation. So Psalm 27:14 reminds us, wait for the Lord and be strong, right? Wait for the Lord, be strong, and take heart and wait for the Lord. That's it. So waiting is not passive, it is active trust. People get so caught up on the word wait. It's wait. The physical world told us that waiting means to stop and resting means that you're lazy. Of course, the enemy gonna have us mixing up words and mixing up the way we live by them. God always tells us to rest. Rest in Him. Rest in Him. And when you learn to rest in Him, you'll be able to uh, go through life with ease. Listen, it's a beautiful thing. That's what healing is all about. So many leaders experience seasons where progress feels slow, but these seasons are often preparation. And that's what you have to remember, is not tests. You're not going through tests. You're not going through, they are lessons to be learned because it's something greater for you. So, most of the season, often preparation, but Sarah's story reminds us delay does not mean denial. That's not what it means at all. God is developing you for what He promised you. So, get away from saying the word test. Lessons that need to be learned for what He's going to promise you. So, this is the reflective question that I want you guys to just think about right now, is where in your life are you currently waiting on God versus resting in God? That's where you need to look at. So let's look at number 2. Impatience can lead leaders to make costly decisions. So while waiting, right? While waiting can strengthen your faith, It can also create moments where leaders feel tempted to take control instead of trusting God. This is the waiting season. Resting season is I trust, I believe, I know I'm good. Waiting is you told me it was going to be a thing. I don't know what's happening. Let me figure it out myself. And this is where Sarah steps into her own. She's trying to force God gave a word, and his word it shall be so. But what she did was try to force what he said to come to light in the time that she wanted it to come to light. So in Genesis 16, Sarah makes a decision out of importance, right? Because she had not conceived, she told Abraham to have a child with her servant Hagar. Now, through culture, this was culturally accepted in those times. It was an attempt to force what God had already promised. But this is the problem that I have with that. If they were already in their old age, my whole thing is that the people had already seen that you don't have a child. I mean, what's going to happen? Who's going to raise the baby? Both of y'all are old now. But she was so determined. And maybe at one point she forgot all about it. And maybe that's what the visit is. So let's look at it this way. She forgot all about it. She just let it go, like, I'm just going to die without ever having kids. And she was okay with that until the angel came, till God came and delivered that message. Maybe it rekindled a flame back in her, because maybe she went into doubt, because now she's in her 90s. Like, the doubt creeped in, and it was like, no, I'm not going to have a kid. And she accepted it. But it was when God come back into your life and rekindle a flame in you, a thought. You know what? When you were a child, you had an imagination, and they always told you your imagination, that's not right, this is not of God. Not that it's not of God, but this is not what you're going to be. You need to do this, get out of your head. But what if I was to tell you that imagination is your child? That was God showing you your purpose. You knew who you were and what you were supposed to do, but the world raised you, your parents raised you in survival mode, so you forgot about all that, and that doubting what you wanted to be. You always wanted to be a writer, but one day you just sit there, and all of a sudden God rekindle that flame that's in you to ignite who you really are, and you finally decide to stand up. You finally, like, you know what, I'm gonna do what I want to do, because all these years they told me I couldn't do, but this is what I want to do. And you take back control of your life, because that's what you were meant to do in that time. In the same way with Sarah, she was meant to have this child at her old age, because it had to be time for him. In this season, it was his time. See, he wouldn't have been able to perform and become the person that he needed to be in the generations 20 years ago. Right? He needed to be born in the new thing that God is creating, because he's going to be the new thing. This is what the new thing looked like. So after she told that, she went in Genesis 16, Sarah made the decision, like we said, and because she had been convicted, she told Abraham to have a child with Hagar, right? Go ahead, go have a child with her. And that was accepted back then. So she was trying to force what God had already promised. She's forcing it in the time that she need. Now, just think about this. God did not give her son in the time that she felt, when she was in her 20s, when she was 19, when she was young. I mean, back then it was having babies at 12, because cultural. But then she didn't have it then. But he would not have blossomed back then, because of the time that God need him now. He need him strong for what's to come. When God get ready to evolve and make things happen, he birthed the strongest people in that time. But not there. If he would have been old, trying to come into the new age where God is doing a new thing. No, God needed fresh blood, because baby, you're going to be the face of it. You're going to understand it, because I'm going to teach it to you. So it's going to be built off your back. So those are the type things. That's why you can't force God's hand, because what happened is all it did was make her upset. So what seemed like a solution created what? Conflict, tension, and long-term consequences for her and Abraham. It seemed like Abraham, when you read, he was just so like, okay, well, what do you want to do? Okay, wife, like, he was just so cool with whatever way it go. Sarah, what is it that you need of me? He was so focused on pleasing God, and then after pleasing God, okay, wife, what do you want? She like, okay, I don't want the servant anymore. Okay, well, I'll send her away. Even though this is the only son I have to make you happy, I'll go ahead and send them away. And I don't know what's going to happen to them, but right. So Even though it seemed like a solution for her, it was not a solution. It was created conflict, tension, and long-term consequences. This reveals a key leadership truth, and that truth is that impatience can lead to decisions that create unnecessary complications. As a leader, being impatient about something can lead to decisions that create unnecessary complications. How many times in our own life that we made a decision, right, that we felt would be good for everybody and it backfired because now, look at me now. I don't even care if it's in a marriage. You chose to marry someone, force that because y'all been together for so long, force it, you got into it, and now it's long-term consequences. It doesn't matter how it goes. You understand? So leaders often feel pressure to act quickly, but forcing outcomes before the right time can lead to problems that could have been avoided. And but you learn those things through life lessons, right? You don't just step into leadership today and just say, I'm a leader. I know that's what the jobs do. I can write my resume and I can do that as a job, but I'm talking about in purpose. This is the reason why God haven't blessed you with things that you've been asking and praying for, right? You haven't gotten those things. And the reason you haven't gotten those things yet is because you have to go through the lessons. Because the weight that's going to be on it, if you put it on you right now, it is too heavy. You will not be able to carry it. You would not be able to handle it. You will question yourself. You would not be as confident in yourself. So it's a time you go through things in life and you're like, God, why am I going through this? It hurt. These are different things that I don't want to go through. I didn't ask for this. I'm always a good person. Why is this happening? And then you go ahead. It's because you went ahead. You went ahead of God instead of learning the lesson. But let's get back into it. So even in this, God remained faithful and still fulfilling his promise. Even though she went ahead and had Abraham have a child with her servant, he still, because the promise is the promise. It doesn't matter how you try and manipulate it or not. That's why a lot of us, no lie, we feel very foolish when we jump ahead of God. We ask God for a thing, we pray, and then we go fussing, getting upset, like, God, why not? I'm over it. I don't even want to know. We get mad, and then God deliver. And then now we're looking foolish, like, if I had just waited, right? So his promise showing that while mistakes have consequences, yes, they do not cancel God's plan. God's plan stands. If you missed the God's Plan series it was through leadership through the book of Daniel, go check it out on my podcast. My podcast is Chat with Coach Nine. I'm on our streaming platform. And we did a series of God's plan there. So nothing is going to cancel God's plan, not at all. So a rush decision often prioritize short-term relief over long-term wisdom. Short-term relief over long-term wisdom. So Sarah's story reminds us when you feel pressure to act quickly, you need to pause. Wisdom grows in patience. You have to pause. You have to take the time to step back and say, okay, I need to regroup. And that's part of healing that I teach you, learning how to respond instead of reacting. Reacting is survival mode. And because she was in survival mode, she wanted a thing. She was in passion. Purposes of God. She was in passion. She wanted a thing. Guess what it had her do? It had her to act out and make it come. That's passion. That is selfishness. And that's why it was consequences. However, in purpose, right? This is how can I help others, right? God had told her she will have a child that's going to rule nations, right? That is God. This is how he's going to use her child to help others. Purpose. Her decision only helped herself in the moment and it caused frustration. So I want you to ask yourself, have you ever made a decision because waiting felt too uncomfortable? You made a decision because waiting felt too uncomfortable and it caused you to act out of alignment and go get it, as y'all say, out the mud, right? So God transforms identity as leaders grow. So God will transform your identity as you grow. So one of the most powerful parts of Sarah's story is that her mistake did not define her future because God planned. God's plan is still going to stand. So in Genesis 17, God changes her name from Sarah to Sarah. In Hebrew culture, when a name, it basically represents an identity, what it is going to be, and the destiny of it. But Sarah reflects a limited identity. While Sarah means princess, pointing to a greater purpose connected to nations. which we know, right? So God redefined her future based on his promise, not her past. Based on his promise, not her past. Even when Sarah doubted and laughed, that was in Genesis 18:12, God responded, "Is anything too hard for the Lord?" Genesis 18:14. And even then she tried to lie. I didn't laugh. Now Sarah was a problem to me, you know. It's that whole princess thing right there. She just, it's just, she laughed about it. God asked what was funny. Is anything too hard for the Lord? I didn't laugh. God knows everything. And even with her lying, he still, his plan still prevailed. He still gave her what she, asked for and what was meant for her to have in the time that it was meant for her to have. So this reminds us that leadership is not limited by our past or our doubts. God works through growth and transformation. Now let's look at it like this. What if she had her child, her son, later on in life because maybe she was supposed to have it in her 20s, but maybe it was her mindset, maybe it was her belief, maybe it was those things that kept it. It wasn't until that she had to believe. Sometimes we stunt our own growth because we don't even believe. We just go with the flow. But what if sometimes God don't give us what we want in the time is because we don't believe it to be so? What if her faith really wasn't grounded in who God was? We don't know. Uh, okay. So we don't know. Let me go ahead and put this on Do Not Disturb. Sorry, guys. So in that, that's things that can happen. So she doubted him and he asked. So this reminds us that leadership is not limited by our past or our doubts. Scripture shows this pattern often. And now it showed us where Abram, and he was Abraham, Jacob to Israel, and Saul to Paul. God reshapes identities as your leadership grows. So look at it as your season, right? In every season of your life, you are a different person. You're not who you used to be. You're a different person. That's it. You're a different person. So expect that things are going to change. You're not going to see yourself like you used to see yourself. So many leaders struggle with past mistakes and insecurity, but Sarah's story reminds us that God's calling is not canceled by imperfection. Mm-mm. You're still going to get it. Growth, healing, and transformation are part of becoming a strong leader. Now, I want you to reflect on where might God be inviting you to see yourself differently? What areas of your life does God, want you to see yourself differently? Now, let me explain to you because a lot of people don't understand it. They look for with their physical eyes, but I need you to see it with your spiritual eyes. What same energy keep coming into your life? Different person, but same energy. So instead of saying, God, I'm trying today, but I keep getting the same women, I keep getting the same men, God, what is it? So let's not look at them. Let's not put the blame on them and say all men are bad, all women are bad, all men cheat, all women. We're not saying that. Let's look at self. Okay, what's in me that's attracting this type of thing? Or what's in me? Not saying that you're the problem, it's just that you have to fix self first. Because what's happening is you're at a higher vibration, right? You have a relationship with God, but yet you keep attracting lower vibration because you have not seen yourself the way God sees you. And if you don't see yourself the way God sees you, then guess what you're going to do? You're going to constantly be in areas and around people that mistreat you, fake friends, people that dog you out, use you, take from you. You're going to constantly see yourself as belonging to that group when you've outgrown them. You never fit in anyway, but you don't see yourself. That's that lack of self-worth. So ask yourself, where might God be inviting you to see yourself differently? Look in the mirror. Take some time journaling. Now I'm going to get ready to give you your homework for the day this week. This week, something that you can work on. I told you my whole purpose is to give you work to work on and things so you can focus so much on you. You don't have time for nonsense. I'm the coach that's going to save the world by teaching you how to heal. You better rock with me. So let's do a recap. Sarah's journey reminds us that waiting seasons shape our character. Impatience can lead to difficult lessons, And God is always able to transform our identity as we grow. Now, as we move to the ARPI reflections, I want you to consider how your waiting season, right? Your past decisions and your personal growth are shaping the leader you are becoming. So let's get into the ARPI. For the ones that's new that haven't came in before I caught any of my teachings, ARPI is the 5 pillars of the foundation of my Trinity of Fitness Bootcamp, where I heal you spiritually, mentally, and physically. Now, ARPI, I called it ARPI because it's like your piece of the pie. It's your piece of the pie because you have to acknowledge, release, practice, inner explore, which is self reflect, and empower yourself at all times. In every situation, you need to be using those 5 characters. So let's get into it. I want you to acknowledge fear and doubt. Where is the fear and doubt in your life? I want you to release the comparisons and impatience that you have in your life. And I want you to practice trusting God's timing by not looking at it as the waiting season and look at it as the resting season. I want you to start researching what resting means for you. Resting does not mean sleeping. I did that on I talked about that on my podcast. My podcast is Chat with Coach Nye. Check it out. Resting is not